Good evening and welcome to Simcoe Reads 2021. We would like to start with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe people. The Anishinaabe include the Ottawa, the Ojibwe, and the Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture, and committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. 7 books, 7 libraries, and 1 winner. This competition is based on Canada Reads, with 7 Simcoe County libraries battling it out to champion their books as the book that Simcoe County should read. We had a successful year last year. And in fact, I suppose I should introduce myself. My name is Lisa Morgan. I am last year's winning champion. I defended An Ocean of Minutes by TLM, which won the inaugural Simcoe Reads. I am also a midday host at 107.5 Cool FM in Barrie. And I am really excited to be here with everyone. It is such a fun thing. 7 wonderful books. And we are happy to have with us Barrie, Bradford, West Gwillimbury, Essa, Innisfil, New Tecumseh, and Ramera, facing off in this cover-to-cover competition. And we are joined by 7 champions tonight, and we want to take a minute to meet some of them and learn something fun about these book lovers. Carolina Belmares is our first champion, representing Barrie Public Library. Carolina is defending her book choice, A Mind Spread Out on the Ground by Alicia Elliott. Carolina's superpowers include steering a chaotic and supportive household, running a successful business, writing, educating, and helping women achieve their fitness goals. Carolina, speaking of superpowers, what is the most obscure superpower that you could want?
I was really excited to get this question because I love seeing people smile. I love making people happy. So the most obscure superpower that I would love to have is the ability to always choose the perfect gift for every occasion, for each person, and just make their day and make them happy.
That would be fantastic.
Yes, exactly.
What would the perfect gift for you be right now?
I don't know, maybe a nice dinner with all good friends that I've made here tonight.
That would be nice. All right, next up we have Bradford, West Gwillimbury Public Libraries champion, Emily Dahlgren. She's defending Aisha at Last by Uzma Jalaluddin. Emily Dahlgren is 16 years old, and she is busy with her own business, the Munchies concession stand, as well as a Bradford Christmas, the foundation she started with her sister, and she stays active by reading, writing, and editing videos. So Emily, would you rather solve a mystery with Sherlock Holmes or Jake Peralta? I don't know who Jake Peralta is.
Oh, well, let me just tell you. Okay. Jake Peralta is a main character in my absolute favorite TV show, Brooklyn Nine-Nine. So as you can imagine, this is a very hard question for me to even imagine an answer for. But after some very long thought, I think I love Sherlock Holmes, and I've seen the movies, read the books, all of it, but I have to go with Jake Peralta, 100%. You know, like I say, he's my favorite character, my favorite TV show. So I gotta go with him. You know, he's my guy. And ultimately, I guess only people that watch the show would know this, but why wouldn't I want to solve a case with an amazing detective / genius, right? Yeah, it's from the show. But
okay.
Yeah, if you get it.
But isn't Sherlock also a detective / genius?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Just, you know, season 1 Halloween heist. Jake Peralta is crowned the amazing detective / genius. So we'd be great partners, though.
All right, Emily, thank you.
You're welcome.
From ESSA Public Library, we have champion Grace Baker defending Gutter Child by J.L. Richardson. Emily Baker is a grade 11 student at Nottawasaga Pines Secondary School, an avid reader, and passionate about performing in musical theater. Grace Baker, would you rather have coffee with Veronica Roth or Suzanne Collins?
I think I would rather have coffee with Veronica Roth, and only because the book series that Veronica wrote, the Divergent series, was the first series that kind of got me into reading, got me into my entire book obsession. And although Suzanne Collins, I love her Hunger Games series, Divergent has won my heart on this one.
All right. I like both of those series. My favorite was Hunger Games, though. Yeah. Next up, we have Anne Smith from Innisfil Idea Lab and Library. Anne is championing The Company We Keep by Frances Itani. Anne Smith is an active volunteer with the Innisfil community, including being the current chair of the Innisfil Idea Lab and Library Board, and has always had a passion and love for reading since early childhood. Anne, if you could meet any fictional character in the world, who would you choose?
This one's easy for me. It is Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes is the most written about, the most famous detective and fictional character in the history of books, I believe. There's over 25,000 films that have been made about Sherlock Holmes himself. He was genius. In a time when there was no forensic science available, he created forensic science, and a lot of people thought he was a real person. And when his author, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, killed him off at one point, there was such an uproar that he had to resurrect him again. So, and to this day, all around the world, there are serious Sherlock Holmes fan clubs. He was the first official character to have a fan club. So that's who I would definitely want to meet.
Thank you. From Midland Public Library, we have Katie McLaughlin defending The Centaur Wife by Amanda Duke. Katie McLaughlin is a flower farmer and an event designer from Tiny, Ontario, where she lives with her son, her husband, and dog. Katie, would you rather visit Neverland from Peter Pan or Wonderland from Alice in Wonderland?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, both are places that are like sort of surreal, somewhere that's like dreamland, but sort of on the edge of a nightmare. So it would be my first destination location if I was traveling somewhere right now in our post-COVID world or in COVID world. But I would go with Wonderland. And I think it's right there in the name. You've got Neverland, where you never grow up, or Wonderland, where you wander around in this wonderful world growing up. And it might also be because I'm a flower farmer and there's lots of gardens and flowers towering over your head. So I feel like I'm probably partial in that regard, but definitely Wonderland.
All right, thank you. From New Tecumseh Public Library, we have Judy Penn-Shellick defending Greenwood by Michael Christie. A former journalist and magazine editor, Judy is the author of the best-selling Marketville Mystery and Glass Dolphin Mystery series. Judy, you have the option to travel forward or back in time once. So without changing anything, you can come back to your regular life whenever you want. So do you go forward or backward?
I absolutely go backward in time. And because I'm an author and a former journalist, the person I would most like to meet would be Truman Capote. And the time that he was in researching the Clutt family murders in Kansas, he wrote in cold blood. It took him 6 years to write it. And you have to realize that it was a time before internet, before 24/7 news cycles. He just went to Kansas, interviewed 2 cold-blooded killers, and he wrote 8,000 pages of notes. 8,000 pages. I mean, I can't even begin to imagine that as an author. So yes, he was crazy and eccentric and a little bit nuts, and an alcoholic. But I'd love to sit down and have a drink with him.
Oh, thank you. From Ramira Public Library, we have Linda Lyons defending Indian on Vacation by Thomas King. After multiple career choices, mother and grandmother, Linda Lyons now enjoys retirement on the shores of Lake Simcoe. She's grateful for the materials and stimulation provided by the Ramira Public Library. She explores alternate realities, diverse character traits, and philosophical challenges on her life journey while enjoying the natural beauty which surrounds her. Linda, if you could be any fictional villain, what would you be?
I don't want to be a villain. So this question was a toughie because I thought of Iago and Richard III and Moriarty for the Sherlock Holmes fans. But I chose to, for the purposes of this question, become Wile E. Coyote because I really admire his tenacity and he never hurts the Roadrunner.
Well, thank you. This evening, panelists will have the opportunity to introduce and then defend their book. Keeping in mind the main theme, of course, why should Simcoe County read your book? They will be asked a variety of questions that will cover topics like themes, point of view, and relevance to current events. Each panelist will have up to 60 seconds for their answer. You might wonder how we're going to choose a winner. Well, it's up to you. You watching right now, afterwards will have a chance to go online and cast your vote just once for the book that you think should win Simcoe Reads 2021. The champion's going to get this lovely engraved Yeti cup, which is very handy. Keeps your coffee too hot and your water perfectly freezing. It's lovely. And the winning library is going to get this beautiful plaque that they'll be able to put up for 1 year in the library. So before we begin, let's get to know our books. Each panelist will have 1 minute to tell us about their book and why they love it. And we'll start with Carolina.
My book, A Mind Spread Out on the Ground by Alicia Elliott. This book touched me in ways that I can't properly describe. It was, it forced me to recognize a lot of things that are very difficult. For example, within our country. For reference, she is an Indigenous woman, and these are all essays about her life growing up. It is not a novel, it's her stories. And I find time and time again when people interview her, when people talk about this book, everybody tends to describe it as a very difficult read. And I share that sentiment. But at the same time, when we kind of like step away from that, what we see is, you know, it's difficult for us, but this is her life. These are the things she had to go through. And this was her childhood, and this was her upbringing. And what a privilege it is that we get to qualify it as difficult because we have been removed from that kind of difficult circumstances. So it's absolutely worth your time and read.
All right, thank you, Carolina. Emily, it's your turn.
So Aisha at last follows the story of Aisha, a young Muslim woman who has a dream of becoming a poet. Her dreams are put aside when she becomes a school teacher. Aisha is one of the only people in her family who is not married, and she refuses to have an arranged marriage or an arranged marriage proposal, unlike her younger cousin Hafsa, who is on her way to having her 100th marriage proposal. And then we meet Khalid. Khalid is a smart, compassionate, caring man who can be judgmental at times when it comes to tradition and doing what's proper. So needless to say, the open-minded Aisha and sometimes reserved Kelly don't exactly see eye to eye on certain things when they first meet. So this book follows us through both the journey of Aisha and Khalid's journey to love and acceptance. Some of the things I love about this book is how it highlights very important topics throughout about both their experiences like in the Muslim community and how they grew up, how they're living now in being a Canadian Muslim, and these amazing characters that we get to meet and go on individual journeys with. They're truly unique, and in my opinion, the characters are one of the things that make this book so entertaining to read more about.
All right, Emily, thank you. Next we have Grace.
The Gutter Child by J.L. Richardson was definitely one of the best books I can say I've ever read. It follows Elamina, a young girl who is known as a project case in the gutter system. 100 babies were taken out of the gutter and sent to live somewhat of a better life on the mainland, which is who Elamina was. When her mother dies, she has to go back to the mainland academy where they can train you and teach you for living in the gutter and working for mainlanders. And I loved this book because it outlined so amazingly the price of freedom and how some are born with such privilege and others can born without any at all. And you have to not only work up from where you came from, but struggle to get there.
Next, and with The Company We Keep.
Hi, The Company We Keep. This is a book set in small town Ontario, very similar to the towns that we all live in. It's a group of people who are dealing with grief or loss in their life, and they get together with a group of 6 strangers to talk about their grief and to work through it. It really highlights the community spirit and how a community can come together to help people. And I don't want to give away too much of the book, but it touched chords with me. I think all of us over the past 18 months or so have all experienced some kind of grief, whether it's a loss of person, loss of connection with family and stuff, and it's a great way how a group of strangers can come together and help people through that difficult period in their time. So, great book.
And thank you. Next, Katie, The Centaur's Wife.
Right. I've chosen to talk tonight about Amanda Leduc's Centaur's Wife, which, if you could judge a book by its cover art is really perfect about how the story starts. The story starts off with a young woman named Heather who gives birth to 2 twin baby girls, and then the next morning while she's in the hospital, the world ends in meteor showers and the vines start to reclaim all the human spaces. So it's about Heather's journey through this experience of becoming a mother and having to rebuild the community with people that are around her. It touches on love and loss and grief and trauma and does not shy away from the darkness that we all experience in our lives. And it's for that reason that I recommend it to everyone in Simcoe County to read.
All right, thank you, Katie. Next we have Judy Greenwood.
Thank you. It's written in concentric rings of narrative that represent time and family. Greenwood is an intergenerational saga that takes place in 5 different time periods: 1908, 1934, 1974, 2008, and 2038. And within the book, and with trees as a backdrop, it searches several themes: climate change, environmental activism, colonialism, capitalism, drug addiction, and homosexuality in a time when it was illegal. And so it managed to do all that without ever coming across as preachy. And I would say the prose is nothing short of poetic. I would say it was a literary masterpiece, but it's also a edge of your seat. Can't stop turning the page girl. That's why I love this book.
All right, Judy, thank you. And finally, we have Linda with Indians on Vacation.
Well, first of all, I think everybody should read this book, but particularly those of us who live in Simcoe County, because we share the land with the Indigenous. And we share the history. the passion and the empathy of our two main characters, Blackbird Mavraeus and Mimi Bullshield. Perhaps the most important thing to me during these horrible, horrible times we've had in the last 19 months or so is the fact that this book made me laugh. It made me think about how similar we are to one another, how much we depend on one another, how much current affairs affects how we feel inside, and Thomas King's gentle humor can make anybody laugh. So this is a book that is thought-provoking, and it's just plain fun to read.
All right, Linda, thank you. So Emily, why should everyone, carrying on from what you were saying about your book, why should everyone in Simcoe County read this book?
Ye Shall at Last it's a romance book with many different, and it's been compared to Pride and Prejudice actually, because the story of Elizabeth, Mr. Darcy, and Ayesha and Halit. Similar to Pride and Prejudice, Ye Shall at Last is much more than just an amazing romance. It has components of religion, tradition, morals, family, and acceptance. It really stands out, and one of the reasons I picked it from a large stack, as I'm sure you guys all got, that the suggestions the library gave of amazing books. And I read from all of them, but when I started reading from Ye Shall at Last, I didn't want to stop reading, which I'm sure all of you have as well. It drew me in. It has light humor, entertaining characters, an important topic really that are highlighted throughout the book, as I mentioned before. And that's been the consensus from everyone I've asked that read this book, is it's such an amazing page turner and it's so delightful to read. And that's one of the reasons I recommend the Simcoe County. It's a very enjoyable, light, beautiful book to read.
All right, Emily, thank you. And Grace.
I think this would be a great book for everyone in Simcoe County to read because The Gutter Child touches on very real topics in a way that is unbiased. The certain terms of groups or certain people are never used. They're different terms, so you go in with an unbiased opinion of the way that the world, this unimagined world works. I thought that this book was very eye-opening. I still can truly say I think about this book every day when I go through my life thinking about what it's taught me. It is a great book with a theme of the price of freedom and what does it mean truly be free? Is it what you always imagined it to be? Is there something else out that you're there that you had no idea that maybe society was shutting you off from, that maybe it was shielding you from? There are so many world issues, political, social, all of the above, that this book covers in such a fantastic way through the writing and the characters and the connections they make, and just simply how cleverly so many issues of our world today are incorporated in this book. And I think that that is such a wonderful thing that it can be scary, and it's not an easy read, but I think it's definitely a great book to recommend because I think it might as well be a rite of passage to read this book.
All right, Grace, thank you. And Anne, tell us why Simcoe County should read The Company We Keep.
Okay, well, Simcoe County residents should read this book because it's essentially, you might think it's set in Simcoe County. It's small town Ontario. A group of people come together through notice on a bulletin board in the local supermarket. So we're all familiar with IGA bulletin boards or other companies' bulletin boards, and that's how this group of strangers comes together. And even though it's a book about grief, there's so much laughter in this book as well. You can really laugh at times with some of the characters that are in it. You can feel comfortable reading the book because you can relate. Every one of us can relate to one of the characters in this book. So I think Simcoe County, it's a very comfortable read. Very persuasive arguments throughout the book, but again, there's hope and there's laughter as well as part of the grief process.
All right, thank you. And Katie, why should people in Simcoe County read The Centaur's Wife?
Well, for me, The Centaur's Wife is a must-read for everyone in Simcoe County because it grapples with so many of the challenges that I think a lot of us are facing, those with human connection and building relationships, and how to deal with things that are difficult that have happened, trauma and grief, and how those are linked with love. and how if we don't deal with that, we'll have difficulty with love, and therefore also forming those human connections which are essential to our survival and building healthy communities. And Simcoe County is rich with really wonderful communities, and it's a message that a lot of us are looking for right now. So for me, it is definitely a must read for everyone in Simcoe County.
Katie, thank you. And Judy, same question to you.
So in British Columbia right now, there have been a lot of strikes against logging old growth timber. 27% of all trees being logged in British Columbia right now are old growth. That means they're 800 years old and they're being cut down for furniture or other countertops or whatnot. And so what Greenwood does is it takes those sort of facts. It doesn't spoon feed them to us. It tells a story of 5 generations of Greenwoods and their different impacts that eventually end up to the Great Withering. And the Great Withering is not something that we can pretend is not going to exist. This because, as the author himself has seen, in British Columbia, there are trees that are 800 years old that are dying because of drought, because they're not getting rain any longer. Beyond that, there's so many other themes in this book: drug addiction, mental illness, poverty, homelessness. And the author himself worked at a homeless shelter, so he knows what he's talking about. And he's got family that's had drug problems. So I just think there's so many. It's so timely, and for that reason, I think everyone should read it.
All right, thank you, Judy. Linda, why should everyone in Simcoe County read Indians on Vacation?
Well, even though Thomas King lives in Guelph, which isn't that far away, he could be our neighbor. He and Mimi could be our neighbor, and we could be traveling with them vicariously as they go from place to place in Europe. But because he doesn't push it in our face, it's just a fact of his life, we get to know what it's like to be on the other side of the coin. Mimi drags him to a museum of torture, and he sees a chair with nails in it. And Mimi says, what kind of a sick mind would think this up? And he suggests it would be the Department of Indian Affairs. And Mimi said, well, those chairs were electric. They weren't nails. I mean, this just comes in the book. This is just what they live with, and we're now just becoming aware of. And so I think it's everybody's responsibility to read this book or something like it.
All right, thank you. And Carolina, why should everyone read A Mind Spread Out on the Ground?
Well, it's actually a very similar reason to Linda's, because same with the author, with Alicia Elliott being Indigenous and her sharing her experiences growing up in Brantford, which is also here in Ontario. And it's just like, I feel that we have a responsibility to hear these stories, to sit through the discomfort that these stories bring forward. It's our duty, and it's in our hands, because that is the bare minimum that we can do in our process of starting to make things right.
To our next question now. Some people think that the first sentence of a novel is the most important. What is the first sentence of your book, and would you agree or disagree based on the book that you're defending? So again, is the first sentence of the novel most important? And we will begin with you, Grace.
I definitely do think that the first sentence of a book can be one of the most important ones. It's something that intrigues a reader to keep going. It's something that makes you want more. And the first sentence of Gutter Child's Call is, when I drew pictures of Mother and me, I used peach for her and chestnut for myself, which is very intriguing, to say the least. It starts off, gets you in a mindset where you want to know more, but really it sets up the next line, which is, why is your skin named after something soft and sweet, and mine is named after something hard and bitter, which I think really hit me when I was reading it. It was definitely a powerful line and really made me think about, our society and how we see the world and how other people see the world based on what privilege they may or may not have been born with. And I think that, especially for this book, the first line definitely does set up the book for a great beginning, a great story. It lets you know how you're gonna like a book. I can usually read the first line of the book and can tell if I'll finish it and I'll love it or if I might hate it. And the first line when I read this, it definitely sparked something. And I thought for sure I'd love it.
And Anne, you're next.
Okay, the first sentence in The Company We Keep is, no one knew Hazel was empty in her house, one room at a time. That's kind of an intriguing opening sentence for a book. So, and what it actually reflects is, we talked about this book is dealing with how different people deal with grief. And what Hazel is actually doing is clearing out her old life. She's clearing out her old life and creating a story of herself now, the way she wants to be and the way she wants to move forward in life. That's essentially what it is.
All right, thank you. And Katie.
Yeah. So the first sentence of Amanda Leduc's novel, The Centaur's Wife, is very revealing of the book itself, but it's also a seemingly simple sentence. It's Heather is sleeping when they come, meteors raining from the sky. Rain seems very gentle. And I think the first sentence of a book is definitely where you get hooked. And I definitely agree with Grace in that you know from that first sentence whether or not you want to keep reading more. And for that first sentence there where I think that it really speaks to that fear that so many of us have, that we don't know when the sky is going to fall. We just like to assume it's not. And this book sets us up with, well, what happens when it does?
All right, thank you. And Judy.
So the first line in Greenwood is, they come for the trees. So immediately you're thinking, well, who comes? Well, it's wealthy people. The year is 2038. People are living in climate-controlled buildings after something called the Great Withering. There are a few trees left in the world, some in Canada, some in Russia, a few in Brazil, that's it. And so wealthy people come to feel the trees, the 800-year-old Douglas firs. And Jacinda Greenwood is a dendrologist who is paid to spoon feed this sort of, utopia to them that doesn't really exist anymore. And I think what the message that you get right away is that our actions they impact the future, even when we're not aware of that. And 2038 is not that far away. And the author himself said he made it uncomfortably close.
And Linda.
The first sentence of Indians on Vacation is probably the exception to the rule. In Prague, we stay at the Hotel Sertovka in the shadow of the historic Charles Bridge. So we say big deal. Except it sets the tone for this measured travel through Prague with this couple that loves one another, and obviously somebody is not as enthusiastic as someone else is. So that's what this, but it doesn't set everybody up.
Can you tell us, you have a little more time, can you tell us just a bit more about what happens in the book, what it's about?
Bird and Mimi are on a quest to discover Uncle Leroy, the family medicine bundle that he took to Europe when he joined a Wild West show. And the fact that he had to join a Wild West show or go to prison because he painted the Indian agent's house with manure is revealed later in the book.
Yes.
So.
All right, thank you. And so we're in Prague. I listened to that one on audiobook. It was, yes, it was good. All right, and Carolina.
Yes, so first line in this book, I think you ladies are absolutely going to understand, and you're going to agree that the first line is, strong. So the first line reads, he took his glasses off and rubbed the bridge of his nose the way men in movies do whenever they encounter a particularly vexing woman. And I said, yes, you know exactly what that means, because as a woman in this world, you have experienced that look. And so if you have ever stood up for yourself, you have been called difficult. If you have ever spoken truth to power, you have been challenging, difficult to work with, vexing. And so this sets the tone perfectly for all that she reveals later about the things she went through in her life.
Okay, thank you. And finally, Emily.
So the first sentence of my book is, he wondered if he would see her today. So that's Khalid, and he's wondering if he will see Aisha today. So actually, they live across the street from each other, but has never met. So this kind of sets up their future love story, if you will. So Khalid has seen Aisha several times when she comes with her red mug as she leaves her car and goes home from work and everything. And although he's never met her before, even know her name or how she speaks or anything like that, he just knows that there's something about her that he's going to love one day.
Okay, thank you. All right, and another question for you. Communicating with others is a core part, and you can flip to question 2. We're back on track. Communicating with others is a core part of the human experience, but the ways in which we communicate are always evolving. What role does storytelling, language, or written communication play in your book? And I have read all of I'm really excited for these answers, actually. Okay, so let us begin with Anne and the company we keep.
Okay, thank you. The company we keep has several different unusual forms of communication contained within the book. One of the most interesting one is one of the characters has a parrot as a confidant. She talks to the parrot all the time. Parrot doesn't respond to her very much, but she likes to let the parrot know everything that's going on in her life. Another important character in the book is a Syrian refugee who has come to Canada and is constantly trying to understand the idiosyncrasies of the English language. He's always trying to perfect his English. He's always reading dictionaries and things like that. One of the things that he said was, how does see you mean goodbye? And it makes you think about some of the idiosyncrasies in some of our languages too. There's a lot of literature themes throughout the entire book, which makes you want to go and read those other books as well. A lot of Arthurian legends within the book, which makes you want to look into that as well. So poetry, music, and movies all play a very big role in this book.
All right, thank you. And Kitty.
Well, in The Centaur's Wife, storytelling is huge. It's almost like the babushka doll of storytelling. It's stories within stories within stories. And The Centaur's Wife is actually a contemporary fairy tale, which is somewhat rare to find and makes it a thrilling read. And storytelling for Amanda Leduc, she's got a quote in the book where it says, stories are never just stories. And that's so true. There's always something deeper going on. And she uses fables to provide warnings and guidance about the world that we live in, and leaves it just enough for the reader to really think these things through and go on that journey themselves.
Great, thank you. What role does storytelling, language, or written communication play in your book, G?
Oh, it's absolutely huge because it takes place in so many different time periods. There are so many stories layered within the story, like we have Harris and his brother Everett that are saved from a train wreck in 1908, and then their relationship. We have Harris becomes a logging magnate, and Everett goes to war and has PTSD and doesn't do so well. But then he ends up finding a baby in the woods and caring for her, Pod, he calls her, which turns out to be Willow. And then, Willow is an environmentalist that puts sugar in the tanks of trucks that are going to chop down trees. And her son becomes a furniture maker using old growth lumber. And, all of these, they've all, I think, Willow put it best is that despite their communication, they often live in opposition of those that came before them.
Okay, Judy, thank you. Linda, tell us about the storytelling and language and written communication in your book.
Without the storytelling, I wouldn't have a book. The book is based, the quest by Mimi and Bird is based on stories of her heritage. And they simply wouldn't have gone on a trip. There would have never been Uncle Leroy. There would be no postcards coming from all of these far off places in Europe with just little teasers. It's cold here, I miss you, and that was from Paris in 1902. And so the stories stay alive, and the stories create the culture that Mimi and Bird and the rest of their peers grow up in. And Mimi's mother is very fond of telling stories, and sometimes they're not necessarily accurate, but who's going to argue with her because they happened before she was born. And if Mimi does try to argue, she says, "You never knew the man," Mimi reminded her mother. "You weren't even born yet." And Bernice Bullshield rather, stories don't die. Stories stay alive as long as they're told.
All right, thank you, Linda. And Carolina, you're next.
Well, storytelling is absolutely essential in this book because it is a collection of essays. Each essay conveys a very particular story or period of her life. And the way that she weaves her personal experience with things that are relevant to Canada and the way that we live, things, different cases that have occurred, and just the way that it's magic. It's like witnessing magic. The way that she is able to describe how her personal experience is intrinsically locked into what we see as a whole in the nation is absolutely beautiful. Her prose is beautiful. She's an amazing writer, and it was a joy. As difficult, challenging as it was at times, it was a joy to read this book.
All right, Carolina, thank you. And Emily, tell us about storytelling, language, written communication in Aisha at Last.
So storytelling is quite prominent in this book. Throughout the book, Aisha turns to her family, specifically her nanny and Anna, to grandparents. And grandparents always had the best stories and plenty of stories to tell. Specifically, they talk about their journey before Canada, or love stories, or stories about family. And then with written communication, I love all their stories. They're probably my favorite characters, I have to say. And then with written communication throughout the book, Khalid stays in contact with his sister, who doesn't live in Canada, who he hadn't seen for years. So that's how they stay in contact, is through email. So throughout the book, we see these wonderful electronic notes that they send to each other about everything that's going on in their lives to kind of stay in contact. So I think that was a really nice part. They got to stay in contact with that, the written word.
All right, thank you. And finally, Grace and Gutter Child.
In The Gutter Child, I think storytelling definitely comes up a lot in the book as a sign of hope and togetherness. It really bonds people in this book. Before the Gutter people were named the Gutter people, they were called the Sosi. And in The Gutter Child, the Sosi people always tell the stories of how they became the Sosi people, how they became the Gutter people, the war with the mainlanders. They tell it to their children, and it's a very prominent story. Everyone knows it. As we would all know nursery rhymes, they would all know this story. And it also comes up in the students at an academy, which the main character goes to. One girl has a book of poems, and they would sneak off every night to read some and just be together and share the words and just live together peacefully.
All right, thank you. Wonderful answers from everyone, and I kind of wish we had hours to just sit here and talk about your books. They're so good. But we are going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Simcoe Reads. Welcome back to Simcoe Reads. 7 libraries, 7 books, 1 winner, and you will get to vote for the winner. I'm Lisa Morgan. Thanks for joining us tonight. We are moving on to our third of 6 surprise questions for our champions today. And champions, you are now welcome to turn to question number 3. In its simplest form, a family is a group of related people. Family can be biological, chosen by you, or even selected for you. Discuss the variations of families in your book and the overall role that family plays in your book. And we will begin this question with Katie and the Centaur's Wife.
Thank you, Lisa. The aspect family in Centaur's Wife is one of the things that I love most about it, because it's so inclusive and varied. And coming from a LGBTQ household myself, that there was an inclusion of 2 women and then basically a daughter that they adopt after this apocalyptic event, that really resonated with me, and I was so excited to see that. But the whole novel is about reforming families when the family that you did know is gone, or the family that you have beside you isn't necessarily the one that you would have chosen. And there's the main character coming to terms with being a mother, and she's got newborn girls and absolutely no resources, no running water, no electricity. There's Tasha and Annie and Elise, the girl that they adopt, and then there's the centaurs. So it's exploration of family in all its varied forms is one of the great things about this book, and why I think it's a good one for Simcoe County.
All right, Katie, thank you.
You're welcome.
And Judy, I'm very excited for your answer.
Yes.
About family in Greenwood.
Well, it's obviously central to the book because it's about the Greenwood family. Interestingly enough, the name Greenwood came to Harris and his brother Everett. They're not really brothers. They're saved by community after a horrific train crash. Everybody has died except for those 2. They were young boys. And they're quite inventive in how they make their money. So they start selling green wood, and the people start calling them the Greenwoods. But family is everything. I mean, we see, and that's 1908, but 1934 we have Harris and his logging empire. We have Everett rescuing Pod and Willow, and then that connection, we have Willow and her son's connection. She becomes an environmentalist, a chain-smoking environmentalist, and homeschooling him. So, and then at the end we have Jacinda Greenwood, who is just learning her roots. So it's all interconnected family throughout the entire book.
All right, Judy, thank you. And Linda, tell us about the role that family plays in your book.
Without family, I don't think, once again, there'd be a book, because they are tracing the family bundle, the special bundle that has been left in Europe somewhere by Uncle Leroy, the infamous and maybe not quite so real Uncle Leroy. And family to me and Bird is very sacred. They are not married. They have been longtime companions. They have had a separation and gotten back together for the sake of the children, but it's for each other as well. And because Bird is of mixed heritage, Mimi's mother's not quite so sure he's a real Indian. But they bond together as a family, and Bird spends a great deal of his professional life trying to make things better for Aboriginal families. So the theme of family goes all through the book, even though they're not legally married. It doesn't matter. They've chosen each other for life.
All right, Linda, thank you. And Carolina, tell us about variations of family and the overall role that family plays in a mind spread out on the ground.
Well, the role of family is essential because this book, again, it talks so much about her life, but it touches so much on trauma. And for most people, where trauma comes from is childhood upbringing or family of origin. And she is no different. So she shares a lot about what it was like for her growing up, in being a mixed child because her father is Indigenous, but her mother is white. And so the internalized racism that she even learned to take on herself as a consequence of seeing racism within her own home, even though it's never called that because I can't be racist if I'm married, right? Like it's so many layers of so many complexities, and her family is at the center of it all. Throughout it all, even though there's so much trauma and difficulty, you also get a big sense for how much she loves her parents. And I really admire that reminder that we are capable of having endured suffering and challenges at the hands of the people who truly love us and continue to love them. And those things can coexist, and we can find a way of understanding, forgiving, integrating, moving forward, and hopefully healing.
Great, thank you, Carolina. And Emily.
Oh, family is very prominent within Aisha at last. Aisha herself comes from a very big family. A lot of her family members live together or live very close to one another. So there's always going over, eating or watching. Her and her cousin are very close, basically sisters. They watch Bollywood movies together, eat junk food, and so family is very important and close. And then there's Halid, who just has his mother, and just both of them, they're a family together. They're a family, you know? And there's also the people that become family, friends that become family, which sometimes even closer than your actual family. In this case, Aisha has a very close friend named Clara. And we get to meet her throughout the book, and then there's something that happens at the end of the book where it kind of brings Clara and Halid and then Clara's family together. And I think that was one of the favorite parts of the book, is when kind of all these different families join up, they could become one big family.
All right, Emily, thank you. And Grace, tell us about the variations of family in your book and the overall role that family plays.
In The Gutter Child, we don't find out till later that the gutter is really just a big family altogether. They all relate over the same issues. But of course, Elamina doesn't know this at first. Growing up on the mainland, she valued family first with her mainland mother, who she had grown up with. She was her mother for all she knew. And she finds family in other kids that she goes to at the academy when they read stories together and they bond over all of these things. And later in the book, which, spoilers, Elamina gets pregnant and is sent to a house for troubled girls where she makes chosen family with other girls who had become pregnant as well. And in this, Elamina decides that she would like to keep her child more than anything. She would do anything for her child, and she was taken from her biological mother without a choice, and she didn't want that to be the same for her child. She definitely values family, and I think that The Gutter Child definitely showcases that.
All right, thank you. And finally, Judy, tell us about family in the company we keep. Sorry, not Judy, Anne, sorry.
Okay, well, I think the family theme is kind of covered by title, The Company We Keep. The 6 main characters in this book have all lost their closest relatives, husbands, wives, mothers, things like that. And the rest of their biological families live far away, so they don't have them to turn to help them through their grief. Their new family becomes these 6 strangers that get together and work through. They're all dealing with very similar issues. And over the course of the book, over the several months that they are meeting, they become very close. They're there for each other through crises and for a lot of things that happen. And spoiler alert, it goes beyond that for a couple of the characters as well, towards the end of the book. So family is the company we keep.
All right, thank you. And our next question has to do with the importance of being a witness to pain. Many of these books do emphasize the importance of being a witness to pain. What does your book have to say about the importance of witnessing or telling of pain and trauma? And we will begin with Judy and Greenwood.
Well, there's definitely a lot of pain in this book, I will say that. I think there's a great line in it where I believe it's Will says, why is it that we save the worst of what we do for our families, right? Like, we're kind to everyone, but to our own families, we're often not as kind. And so I think that's part of it. I'm not really sure if I'm understanding the question totally, to be honest with you. Wish I wasn't first, because I really don't have a good answer for it. Sorry, I don't have a good answer.
Okay, well, thank you. All right, Linda, you've had a little more time.
Thanks. There's a lot of, there's pain in my book, but it's dealt with in a very sensitive and almost not a frivolous manner, but a light manner. Bird has had a complete professional meltdown. He was an award-winning photojournalist, and he specialized in Indigenous causes. And what put him over the edge was interviewing a woman who had been removed from her family. Her mother had 6 children. She was a single woman. She was working. She couldn't take care of them properly. Social services swept in, put her face and all of her brothers' sisters' face on a poster, and adopted them. She went to Norway or Sweden or something. Didn't even find out about her heritage until she was 22. And Bird is trying to write a story about what happens, what the effects on children when this happens so far in the past. And this woman's quite cooperative, but she said, you know, it doesn't matter what you write. You can't give my mother back her family, and you can't give me back 22 years.
Yeah. Linda, thank you. All right, Carolina, tell us about how your book talks about the importance of witnessing or telling of pain and trauma.
This book forces you to bear witness to her trauma. It's the kind of book, after every essay, I had to take a moment to really sit with what I had just read, because I felt like it was not only for comprehending, like, oh my gosh, this is someone's actual life experience, but it was really almost felt like a moment of having to honor what she had just so courageously shared. And so it was an emotional roller coaster for me, because I could relate to a lot of her stories and a lot of her of the challenges that she had to overcome. And so it might feel differently for others, but I generally believe that you can't read this book and not feel something at some point, because if you, the humanity in you will absolutely connect with her pain, and I think that's very valuable, and that's the magic of incredible writers, incredible books who decide to share their stories with us.
All right, Carolina, thank you. Emily, tell us about bearing witness to and the telling of pain and trauma in Aisha at Last, which is a very fun and comedic book at times, but does touch on those topics as well.
Yes, there is one very big moment that comes to mind, and that's that Halid has a job that he loves very much, and he just recently got a new boss who doesn't like new things, who doesn't like change, and specifically she doesn't like Halid for no good reason, because there are certain things, a part of his religion and his culture that he's not able to do. Like for example, he can't shake a woman's hand, and he dresses in a certain way, and because it's different for her, she doesn't accept that, and she doesn't like that. So she tries to find ways to fire Halid. And Clara, which is, as I mentioned before, one of Aisha's best friends, she's witnessing this. She is the head of the HR department, so she's in a very difficult spot. Being this, like, does she honor her boss, or does she honor her code that she has when she became the head of this department? So that is a very big thing that she witnesses, and she has to stand by and watch her boss do these things to Halid, and ultimately decide as a moral decision how she's going to handle this. In the end, this isn't a huge spoiler or anything, but in the end, Claire does help Halid and prevail and show the truth that he's been trying to show Sheila, and enlighten his boss.
All right, thank you, Emily. Grace, tell us about Gutter Child.
I think especially during a certain part of the book where Elamina is told the story of the Sosi people by someone who works at the academy, who is also a Sosi person. Growing up in the mainland, Elamina had never heard of this story, so this woman thought very important that she knew her history and how her people really were without any misconstrued facts or opinions from other people. I think the story definitely, it makes the Sosi people proud to be who they are, but it's not without pain, it's not without trauma, it's not without feeling hurt by what has happened to them in the past, with the mainlanders taking over their land, taking over their rights, making them be in debt for their entire lives. It definitely shows of trauma and pain, but it does really bring the community together.
All right, Grace, thank you. And tell us about the importance of witnessing or telling of pain and trauma in the company we keep.
Okay, well, thank you. The main theme in the company we keep is this group that meet on a weekly basis to talk through their grief. There's a lot of pain in this book. One of the characters is a Syrian refugee. His stories of what happened to his family in Aleppo is truly horrifying for the rest of the group to have to bear witness to. Another of the characters was married to a bully in a very abusive relationship. Sharing her story with the group helped her realize that it wasn't her fault that she was in that abusive relationship. Another character had a husband who was an alcoholic but hid it for years and years. And her comment was she lost him many years before he actually died because of the amount of drinking he was doing. So the whole theme of the book is really people, a minute isn't long enough to talk about this, but a lot of the theme of the book is people talking through their pain with the group and being able to release the stories and the pain that they've been experiencing.
All right, Anne, thank you. And finally, Katie and the Centaur Life.
All right, well, one of the things I love about Amanda Liddick's writing is that she deals so well with writing about trauma and grief and pain. And Heather's story, from the first page, you know that something traumatic happened in her past with her father and his passing. And there's not a character in this story, because it is an apocalyptic event that happened, that isn't going through that. And I think that's something that really resonates with a lot of us here in Simcoe County right now, in that we've all probably gone through some kind of pain and loss, whether it's experiences or people in the recent past, and we're all sort of waiting to process that. And this book looks at what happens when you don't process it, when you don't deal with that pain, and the endurance to get to the point where you can as a community.
All right, Katie, thank you. You can turn to question number 5, your second last question tonight in Simcoe Reads. Some of this year's titles are grounded in realism, while others are speculative. They are fantasy or science fiction. And I want you to discuss the approach that your author took in their book and its effectiveness. And we will begin this round, with Linda and Indians on Vacation by Thomas King.
Well, the title is pretty self-explanatory, so it's realism for sure. But it's more than just a vacation. It's also a quest, a saga, and a journey of self-discovery for both Bird and Mimi. So as much as it's set in a very real world, with flashbacks to previous destinations, Venice, Paris, Nice, and Greece in particular, where Bird finds his own personal heritage, or half of it. It's very effective, this title, because it lets you know, just like the first page, we're in Prague. So there we are.
All right, thank you. And Caroline, tell us about A Mind Spread Out on the Ground by Alicia Elliott.
It's as real as they come. It's autobiographic, of course. And the title of the book itself is a perfect fit for the book, because it describes the word in her native language. It describes the word that they have for depression. There is no direct translation. There's like the loose meaning of, it's like your mind is spread out on the ground. It's like your mind is all over the place. It's like your mind is out there. And that is what their word encompasses. And that is why she chose that title, because of course she goes into mental health, her mother's addictions, everything, all the challenging things that you can imagine. And yes, absolutely fantastic title.
All right, thank you. Emily, tell us about the approach taken in Aisha at Last.
So the author, actually, I had a really great conversation with her, and Ms. Ozma, her main goal for this book was to show the Muslim community in a positive light. So often in movies, TV shows, and in books, they're not shown as regular people. They're shown as the bad guy or the people with a big house and rich. They're not shown as just the everyday people like we all are. And that's the amazing thing about Aisha Bass is that every character in this book, there's a part of the family is wealthy, but the main characters in this book, they're just everyday people. They're everyday Canadians who go to work and pay taxes and grab a double from Tim Hortons and that's something that she really wanted to represent throughout this book, is that just how they can be regular people and how everyone in this character is just a person just living their life and trying to get through life, and that's why I really enjoyed this book. They didn't have to have a special meaning. They were just regular people living their lives.
All right, thank you. Grace, tell us about Gutter Child.
I think that this is definitely a very interesting and clever take on realism, although it is specifically stated in an imagined world. It's set up in this sort of dystopia, but as you read on, you realize that it's not too different from our current world or how we functioned as a society in the past. There's many things that you can see within the book that are very relative to the time or our past, and I think it's very realistic in the ways that it touches on so many issues in so many different ways without actually saying these issues outright, with having to find that yourself. And it doesn't end in a nice little bow, because that's not life, that's not realism. And I think that Gutter Child definitely does a good job of showing realism in a world that's imagined.
All right, thank you. We are talking about the books being grounded in realism, while some are speculative. They are fantasy or science fiction. And tell us about the approach taken by your author in The Company We Keep.
Thank you. Well, Francis Atani certainly is definitely grounded in realism. Everyone here, everyone we know, has suffered loss in their lives. Everybody handles their grief differently. Some of the characters in the book are very sad about their loss. A couple are relieved. It's removed a burden from them. And one feels very guilty that she maybe isn't sad enough. The author manages to get the message across, so that even though everyone has different reactions to the way they handle grief, there's no right or wrong way. And that even though it might seem overwhelming at the time, the message we hear all the time heals all things, time does improve the way you feel, and this group of strangers is helping everybody to understand that what they are feeling is perfectly normal and help them to move beyond it.
All right, thank you. And Katie, tell us about the approach taken in The Centaur's Life.
Well, Amanda's approach is really unique, and the genre is magical realism, which isn't a genre that I had really read before. And when talking with Amanda, she noted something that it doesn't really even fit into that genre. There isn't really a genre that it fits neatly into, and I think that's because it is a fairy tale. It's a contemporary fairy tale, which is a very rare thing to come across. And when we think of a fairy tale, something like Hansel and Gretel or Swan Lake, those were written in their contemporary times too, and it's only now that we're seeing them as old in a historical lens, and that's how we process fairy tales now. But this is a fairy tale for here and now, and it is one of the things that I think it makes it a must-read for Simcoe County.
All right, thank you. And finally, Judy.
Yeah, so Greenwood is not just the name of a family, it's also the name of an island. One of the last remaining treed islands in 2038. So there's that. And while much of it is grounded in realism, he addresses the Great Depression, the Dust Bowl, and homelessness, poverty, capitalism, and all of that. There's also speculative because we're looking at 2038 in a part of it. It's being penned as a new genre, which is called cli-fi. so climate fiction. And so, yeah, so Michael Christie's sort of the first one to have written a sci-fi book. That's the way it's being categorized now, which I think is pretty cool. And yeah, so, and I think the reason everyone should read this book is because it does show us that everything that we do today will impact a future generation.
All right, Judy, thank you. Well, we are at question number 6.
Okay.
The final question tonight in Simcoe Reads 2021, and it has to do with heritage. I'll let you all turn to question number 6.
We don't have that.
Oh, well, I'll read it for you. Okay. Heritage is defined as the full range of our inherited traditions, monuments, objects, and culture. Most important, it is the range of contemporary activities, meanings, and behaviors we draw from them. With this definition in mind, what role does heritage play, and how does it shape the decisions and actions in your book? And we are going to begin this question with Carolina.
Heritage is very much at the backbone of this book because a lot of it involves her conversations with herself about who she is, where she belongs, what her background represents, and how it propels her forward or keeps her from advancing. And all of these conversations that we get to witness throughout the book are so important because they offer us perspective into somebody else's life. And heritage is something that I can very deeply connect to because I am not from here. There's this feeling of once you leave your home, you no longer can go back because that home as you knew it no longer exists. Even though the people are there, even though the place is there, it's different now. It will never be the same. And so it's a journey throughout this book, and so heritage plays a big part in how she goes through making sense of all of that for herself.
All right, thank you. And Emily, tell us about heritage in Aisha at Last.
Heritage is, at the root of Aisha at Last, a part of her culture and her family, and not only part of the religion. Very much all of them go to the same mosque, and very regularly. They're very big parts of the mosque, but also just in day to day. For example, whenever you welcome someone into your home, you welcome them with a cup of chai, which is like a tea for many of us to know. And I actually talked about the author about this specifically, is that there were a lot of things that she mentioned throughout the book has to do with her culture, her heritage. And she thought about putting like an index almost of saying what she meant, people didn't know. And then she realized that how this could further educate people. Like for me, if I didn't know what something specifically was, I'd look it up and I'd educate myself on that heritage and on what that meaning was. So heritage in this book brought us the journey of their heritage, but also made us learn more about their heritage.
All right, Emily, thank you. Grace.
I think it's very prominent in the gutter child for the Sosi people. When the Sosi people are born, they were branded with an X on each hand, and that is something that I think a lot of the Sosi people in the book connect with. They started to take it back as a symbol for their own freedom in rebelling. But as culture, it is such an important thing to be connected to your past, to where you come from, which Elamina really wasn't in the start of the book. She really denied the gutter as her home. She really didn't accept it. She didn't want to accept it. And as she grew up, got older, heard about the stories of the Sosi people and of gutter, she learned that it wasn't such a bad thing that the world made it out to be. It was really beautiful, and it was a home that she always had been from and could always go back to.
All right, Grace, thank you. Anne, what role does heritage play in your book?
Heritage plays a big role in this book with some of the characters and places they came from. One of the characters came from England and was a World War II evacuee during the war, and it really shaped her life, made her very resilient moving forward. The parent of one of the characters was in a Japanese internment camp in Canada during World War II. Very traumatizing experience for that girl's mother, and it resulted in her being bitter and not a very nice person to her daughter as she grew older. And one of the characters came from the horrors of Aleppo in Syria and saw the destruction of most of the heritage in his country, and he's still struggling what he lost and knows it will never be able to be the way it ever was again.
All right, thank you. And Katie, tell us about Heritage in The Centaur's Wife.
Well, Heritage is a series of stories that we tell ourselves and we tell each other, and The Centaur's Wife does a wonderful job at really bringing that to the forefront. And when they're all sort of, the people in this community are grappling with, they don't have any of those original trappings that we see as heritage. There's no homes left, there's no monuments left. What they just start doing instead is telling stories. And the main character, Heather, just walks all day trying to get her babies to calm down, and she tells the stories over and over and over again. And it's really about creating a sense of identity and belonging, and they're all searching for home, and which is what we're doing when we're talking about heritage and creating it. And the way that the book approaches that topic is really brilliant.
Thank you. So Judy, what role does heritage play, and how does it shape the present decisions and actions in your book, Greenwood?
Well, again, there are 5 generations, but I think there would be no book if it wasn't for Euphemia Baxter's journal. She writes a journal when she's pregnant. She's going to be giving her child up to R.J. Holt, who's a very wealthy man, and she decides she can't do it. So she runs off and knows that she can't make it any further, so she puts her baby up in a tree in the woods with this journal, which is then found by Everett Greenwood, who rescues her and takes her across the country and eventually gets her to his brother, who's quite wealthy, that will raise her. And so throughout this journal is one thing that everybody wants, because it can give money, peace, give her a chance. So I think heritage for this book, it's everything, right? It's everything, because we've got 5 generations.
Hey, Judy, thank you. And Linda, finally, tell us about heritage in Indians on Vacation.
Mimi and Bird, of course, are on this quest to find this family medicine bundle, which is lost to the ages. They've gone to Prague is the last place they got a postcard to follow. So heritage is so important to them and to everyone they know. And they're creating a new family bundle. Now it happens to be in a zippered nylon bag, and they've had somebody do some traditional beading on it. But for all these places they've gone looking for the old family bundle, they've picked up something to add and create a new family bundle. So the family stories and the family bundle will continue. And hopefully, if the nylon zippered bag disappears in 100 years, someone else will pick up and start again, because heritage is everything.
All right, thank you. Well, those watching at home are going to have the chance to vote on your books. I'm going to give you the chance now, one last minute, to convince the viewers at home why they should vote for your book in Simcoe Reads 2021. And we're going to begin with Emily and Aisha at last. Go ahead.
So Aisha at Last really is a book for everyone, even if you don't read often or you're not much of a reader. My mom, for example. So my mom doesn't read very often, but when I started reading Aisha at Last, I was so excited about the book. I needed to talk to someone about it. So I kind of cornered her. But we were in the car. There was nowhere she could go. So we went in the car and I kind of just told her everything that was happening in the book. And then we loved talking about it so much that I eventually started reading the book out loud to her, and she loved it. And it was something that we had together that we loved to talk about and discuss about. And then there's me, who has never. I've never read a romance book ever, or romance genre book ever before. I love crime books and mysteries, like Sherlock Holmes. You know, I love reading those kind of books, you know, finding clues and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So this was a new overall genre for me to read. That's the amazing thing about A You Shed Last, is that it has so many genres and covers so many topics. There even is a little mystery within the book as well, is that it can appeal to everyone. And that's the reason I'm recommending this book to everyone in Simcoe County. Go read A You Shed Last. I promise you'll enjoy it.
And Grace.
I think everyone should read Gutter Child by J.L. Richardson because it provides such an insightful way of looking into culture and privilege and the price of freedom, which is definitely a very big theme. And as I've mentioned before, the non-biased opinion going in, making sure that you are going in with a clear slate, learning from your own experiences, what you think, not what someone else tells you. It definitely gives you a new way of thinking. It definitely gave me a lot to think about. As I was reading it, there'd be times when I'd put it down and just think about how this would be affecting so many people that I had never really thought of, coming from a place of privilege, that there's so many people born with privilege, so many people born without, and that's just the way the world is sometimes. And it definitely touches on so many amazing issues that really must be talked about. And I think that if you want to learn more, as we all should be learning more, The Gutter Child is a great place to start.
Thank you. And tell us why everyone in Simcoe County should read The Company We Keep.
Everyone in Simcoe County should read The Company We Keep because we can all relate to it. It's everybody in this room, everybody watching, it's all our neighbours. It's a story of love, loss, friendship, dealing with grief, and the power that a community can bring to help heal a situation. It also deals with lots of literature, music, movies, history. There's so many different themes running through this book that just makes you want to learn more about each of those instances. It's very timely for the current situation, especially with the Syrian refugee, given that we are now receiving Afghan refugees into the country. And it will give everybody an idea of what those people have had to face and what sacrifices they have had to make to actually come to this country. So I recommend that everybody in Simcoe County read this book.
Thank you. And Katie, convince us with The Centaur's Wife.
The Centaur's Wife is unlike any book I've read before, and it's for that reason I say that you should go out and get The Centaur's Wife and read through it from your local library or online. The Centaur's Wife explores so many of the topics that we find ourselves grappling with right now, and it does so in a magical, vivid way. It is a dark fairy tale in the way that many classic fairy tales are, and the way that it looks at trauma and grief and how it's inextricably linked to love, and how with love we can form our human connections and a more inclusive community that we can rebuild together. So that is why I recommend The Centaur's Wife, and everyone should read it in Simcoe County.
Thank you. And Judy, why should everyone read Greenwood?
It rained in Greenland for the very first time in August 2021. Not snow, rain. So climate change is real, and Greenwood addresses that. And it does it without being preachy, and it does it with a whole lot of with empathy, and it does it to give us understanding. And it's definitely more than one note. It's riveting. It's an intergenerational page turner, and it explores the roots of family, of secrets, and yes, it's dystopian, but there's also hope. There's also a little bit of what if throughout it. And it's a book that will stay with you, a book that you can talk to your friends, your family, book clubs with. So that's why I would recommend it. I'd say that every single book here tonight deserves to be read, absolutely. But if you can only read one, I urge you to read Greenwood.
Thank you. And Linda, why should Simcoe County read Indians on Vacation?
I agree with Judy. Every single one of these books should be read, but particularly Indians on Vacation, because it has It has something for everything. Everyone has everything. There's a quest, there's a family saga, there's travel, there's love, there's mental illness. It has a very strong urge for the pursuit of justice. And this is really, really important because we get to travel along with Bert and Mimi and see the things they see. The refugees in the train stations and people picketing them, and to relive through the stories of the family and the people Bert runs into in his professional life, the horrors of racism. So it opens your eyes, but in a less than punch in the face aspect, and you get to laugh.
Thank you. Finally, Carolina, convince Simcoe County.
This book is relevant now more than ever. I think we are all very much aware of everything that has been happening around the confirmations of thousands at this point of bodies of children found in residential schools in Canada and the United States. And if that doesn't incline us to learn directly from the people whose family, whose background, whose heritage has been shaped as a consequence of residential schools, and I don't know what will. It's absolutely our duty, our responsibility, and I also think that for this book in particular, because of the way that she is so forthcoming about everything that she has gone through, it also offers us an opportunity to reconnect with our own humanity and compassion.
Thank you. Well, there you have it. 7 books, 7 libraries for Simcoe Reads 2021. We need you to pick a winner, and you can find the link on all the libraries' websites. Please vote just once which book you think could win Simcoe Reads 2021. You have until Tuesday, the 12th, at 11:59 p.m. to cast your vote. So please tell your friends and vote so that we can pick a winner. Thank you for joining us. I'm Lisa Morgan.